So this is what I mean when I say the oral history window is a deadline. Every generation of your family tree has 2 layers. There's the documented layer. This is what shows up in the records, what the state decided was worth writing down, whether or not it was accurate or not, right? What survived the fires and floods and bureaucratic indifference. And then there's this living layer. This is what people who were actually there remember. What they were told, what they were warned about, what they heard, what they saw, what they noticed, but nobody ever would explain to them. You may be having things pop up in your mind as I'm saying this. Once it is gone, it is gone. There is no digitization project for human memory. And I want to be really specific about what that means practically for your research. The generation that we are losing right now, our family in their 70s, their 80s, their 90s, these are the last people alive who had direct relationships with people born in the 1800s. Let that land for a second. That's crazy. There's a stone somewhere in Monroe, Louisiana. It's so heavy that you probably can't pick it up, and it never wears out. And it belonged to my great-grand-aunt, Ozelia. And she got it from her mother. And nobody alive could tell you exactly how far back it goes, only that it came from a time before money, before grocery stores, and before you could just buy what you needed. Now, things are so convenient, it's hard to even imagine that. But my cousin Audrey knew about this stone. She remembered it. She sat in the kitchen while it was used, and she watched the women in her family work. And last week, my cousin Audury Perot passed away in Monroe, Louisiana. She was 78 years old, and this episode's for her. Hi, I'm Danielle Romero, and this is the NYTN podcast where we talk about American identity and family stories and the silences that the official history didn't bother to preserve. And before we get back into it, this podcast is run entirely on Patreon. And I've been trying to do more video podcasts for Patreon, and it's audio everywhere else. So if you want the episode a full week early, plus the research and primary sources that go along with it as it's relevant, come find me at patreon.com/NYTN. So I want to ask you something before we get to my cousin Audrey's story. And I'm so excited to tell you about her. She was an amazing woman. Think about the biggest brick wall in your family story. The one that you've been working on for months, maybe years, or maybe records stop. Or maybe a certain name doesn't show up again. You can't find this ancestor after a certain point. Or maybe your family appears in one census and they vanish, but they didn't really vanish. You know what I'm talking about, where you're just like, something's wrong here. Okay, now I want you to think about whether there is a living person in your family, older, maybe someone that you don't talk to much, maybe someone you have been meaning to call, who might actually have some answers for you. You'd be surprised. Not that they're going to have a document for you, but they might know something. Because this is what 25 years of this research has taught me, that the answer to some of the hardest questions in our family story is not going to be in the archives. It's going to be in the person. And that person is getting older. And one day, it could be next year, it could be next week, they will be gone. And everything they know, they will take with them permanently. There's no digitization project that can recover it. No AI can reconstruct it. It will simply not exist anymore. This is a deadline and is moving whether we are ready for it or not. And I know this because of what happened when I almost didn't get to connect with my cousin Audrey in time. So I had been researching my great-grandmother Lola for years before I ever made it to her home of Louisiana in person. Lola had left Louisiana as a young woman, moved to New York, and somewhere in that transition became someone that the records didn't recognize anymore, right? She tried to pass for white, and her Louisiana ancestry, her Louisiana origins, she buried the best that she could. And the family that she left behind, sisters, cousins, the whole Cane River network that she came from, I knew they had to still exist, but I couldn't get to them through ancestry paper trails alone. This was scary. I connected with another cousin who told me about Audrey, my cousin Chris, and he said that Audrey remembers everything, he told me, and she remembers it right. And that was enough for me. So I had called the West Monroe Public Library, and I had asked for a meeting room. My hands were literally shaking when I was writing down the information. I was planning to go meet Audrey in Louisiana. I brought recording gear. We brought a case of water. I brought my turquoise saddle blanket because I needed something familiar in this room. My husband and I set it all up. We sat down, we waited, and I genuinely did not know if anybody was going to walk through that door. And then she walked in with no hesitation. Audrey came in, gave me a hug. Coppery skin, short gray, white hair. This woman did not just remember names and dates for me. She remembered who sat where at church, who served what at funerals, what cousins were not speaking and why, and how she felt about it. And Audrey remembered the emotional weather of every room where a family story of ours had tried to surface. And within the first hour of this interview, which it really stopped being an interview, it was just a conversation with my cousin, she handed me information that no courthouse record could ever give me. She told me about Camp D, Louisiana. Now, I knew my family had come from Camp D, Louisiana. I saw that on the records. This is the Cane River area before they had relocated. Now, after they had left Camp D, they didn't go back. Not really anyway. Audrey told me that when she was a girl, her grandparents, so it'd be my great-grandmother's sister and her husband, once went back to Camp D for a funeral. And Audrey really wanted to go with them. And her grandfather stopped her and he said, and Audrey repeated this word for word for me. He said to me, "You can never go. Don't you ever go there. I will not allow you to go to Camp D." And she got no explanation. And she's like, kind of was taken aback by it. Now, Audrey was in her 70s when she told me this story. And let me tell you, you could still hear the weight of this on this woman. This warning had lived with this woman her entire life. And she had carried this fear and this confusion without fully understanding it. And then she gave it to me in this library in West Monroe, where I have a little tiny recorder running. And this cracked open a layer of my family's history that no document to this point had ever touched. If you were labeled as colored in Camp D in the post-Reconstruction South, it meant that you would live under a completely different system, a totally different set of rules. Families who had occupied, like my family did, an ambiguous racial space for generations and were allowed to, suddenly found that space collapsing. So people had to move. People had to reinvent themselves. People protected their children the only way they knew how, by putting distance between them and whatever that old place represented. That is true even if your family were immigrants to this nation. You're going to have similar experiences. And they did not explain why, because explaining whatever that is meant naming it. And naming it meant handing a child something heavy enough to change how they could see themselves and move through the world. But it was also genealogy. To me, it was as real and important as any document that you could find, even though this never got written down. Audrey was the only person alive in my family who still carried that exact memory in that exact form. And she's gone now. The Camp D warning was not the only thing Audrey was holding from our family story, though. She also knew about the stone. They had something called tamale days. Basically, it was 2 days straight where they would make hundreds and hundreds of tamales. And women from church would come help because she needed the hands. And little Audrey was allowed to help roll tamales, but nothing else, she said. That was all she could do. But she remembered every part of that experience. And it blew me away.
She made tamales for 2 days, and she would make hundreds of tamales. It was my grandmother's, and they used it. I remember sitting in the kitchen with them when they were grinding the corn, the lye, it was called lye. And they had a stone, they would grind it on there, and then they would make the process to make the hot tamales.
The stone, and where did she get it from, do you know?
Her grandmother. She said, this goes back in the family. I don't know how far back it went, because they didn't have money to buy stuff like that. So it came from generations passed down. And that stone is, when you see it, it never wears out. It's really a stone. I can't pick it up, it's so heavy.
So she said in the corner of her kitchen there was a stone grinding tool. It was called a metate y mano. And that Ozelia's grandmother had brought it into the family. And Audrey believed it was hundreds of years old. She told me it probably came through Mexico, through Texas, into Louisiana. And it was passed in my family from mother to daughter for so long that by the time it reached Ozelia's kitchen, nobody could tell you the full story of where this stone had been. Only that it was ours. Only that they still used it. Only that it never wore out. It was a flat stone that had almost like a stone rolling pin that went along with it, and you would crush the corn kernels to make the masa for the tamales. I didn't even know what a metate y mano was when Audrey described it. I had to go look it up afterwards, and when I did, it clicked into place against something I had already had in my research, because we need to bring everything, like all different angles, right? But I hadn't connected this. It was this Native American haplogroup running through my mom's side of the family. We showed up on our DNA test. So my mom's mom took the DNA test, my mom, I did, and we all had C1c haplogroup. It's a Native American haplogroup. And the DNA was there, okay, but not the story. And Audrey then handed me the physical object to go along with it. This was a stone that was living in her closet in Monroe, Louisiana, that no record in any archive I have ever seen could ever have mentioned to me. That's the thing about this kind of knowledge. It's not going to make it into the official record because the official record was never interested in it. Nobody was asking about this. The census didn't ask what your grandmother used to grind her corn with. The death certificate didn't ask what language your grandparents switched to when the children started asking questions. But Audrey remembered, and when I asked, she told me everything she knew. This continuity, this through line that paper cannot give you, she was living proof of it. Now, this is what I want you to sit with, because this is the part that matters for your own research. I had been studying the Perot family for years before I ever heard of Audrey and met her, sat down with her. I had census records, I had death records, I had church documents, I had DNA results. I had built what I thought was a reasonably solid picture maybe of where my family came from and how they moved through the world. But in this one afternoon in a library in West Monroe, Louisiana, Audrey had dismantled several assumptions I had made, and she replaced them with something richer and more complicated and more true. But she didn't have documents with her. She did it with her memory, with her stories. So this is what I mean when I say the oral history window is a deadline. Every generation of your family tree has 2 layers. There's the documented layer. This is what shows up in the records, what the state decided was worth writing down, whether or not it was accurate or not, right? What survived the fires and floods and bureaucratic indifference. And then there's this living layer. This is what people who were actually there remember. What they were told, what they were warned about, what they heard, what they saw, what they noticed, but nobody ever would explain to them. You may be having things pop up in your mind as I'm saying this. The documented layer can be recovered, right? Records get digitized, archives get indexed, somebody finds a box in a courthouse basement, and then suddenly a whole branch, maybe your family tree snaps into focus. That's awesome. We love documents. This has happened to me more than once, and it genuinely is thrilling every single time. I love documents, love primary sources, but the living layer cannot be recovered. Once it is gone, it is gone. There is no digitization project for human memory. There's no archive that stores what Audrey's grandfather said to her in the hallway 60 years ago. That knowledge existed with this one person, and now it exists with me. And I want to be really specific about what that means practically for your research. The generation that we are losing right now, our family in their 70s, their 80s, their 90s, these are the last people alive who had direct relationships with people born in the 1800s. Let that land for a second. That's crazy, okay? Direct relationships. Not people who researched it, not people who were doing history projects on it. These people sat in rooms with people who were born before the Civil War ended, or just after, or in the decades when Reconstruction collapsed and Jim Crow calcified, and families all over this country made decisions under pressure that shaped everything that came after for you and your family. Your great aunt, who is 84, might have sat on a porch with someone who remembered something your research desperately needs. Your older cousin, who lives 2 states away, might be carrying a family story that would blow open your biggest brick wall. The person your family has been meaning to visit, you know who I'm talking about. The family member who's getting older, the one in your family who remembers everything. This person is a primary source. This person is a living archive. And we're humans. We have a limited run, right? You can't just keep accessing it forever. And I'm not saying this to kind of scare you or be negative. I'm saying it because I have watched this window close year after year in my own family and in the families of everyone that I do this work with. And every single time, the people left behind, we all say the same thing. I wish I had asked something else. I wish I had talked to them sooner. I thought there was more time. I didn't know what questions to ask. And now I can't. So I'm going to give you the questions. Ask your family what they remember about where their family came from, not just the city. Ask them the feeling of it. Ask them, are there places that the family avoided? Were there names in the family that people didn't like to mention? Did relatives disappear from the story? Ask them what language the older people in the family spoke when they didn't want the children to understand. Ask them the food the family made. How did they cook it? What tools did they use? These are all massive parts of your family story. Especially this last one. What were you not supposed to ask about? Because the silences in your family's history are not empty. They are full. The silences are full of decisions that got made under pressure, fears that got passed down without explanation, strategies for survival that are hard to understand decades later, right? When we're on the outside looking in. Audrey's grandfather didn't tell her why she couldn't go to Campty, but Audrey remembers that he said it, and that memory, that piece of a warning she carried for 60 years without understanding it. We worked together to understand more about our family's history together than we could have done apart. It was amazing. You do not need perfect equipment to interview your family. You do not need to have finished your research first, because guess what? You're never going to finish it, okay? You do not need a list of perfectly crafted questions. You need a phone that you can record with, and you need a living elder and the willingness and patience to sit down and let them talk. Do it this week. Do it for Audrey. Not when things calm down, not after the next family event. Call them this week. Because I almost didn't get that interview with Audrey. I almost just talked to her, and I was thinking I'll just take a little bit of notes. I'll make some mental notes, and we can go back with better equipment later. And I'm so glad that my husband pushed on this. And he pressed record. I'm so glad that I got in that car and drove down there. And I'm so glad that when someone told me Audrey remembers everything, that I believed them and I showed up. I'm so thankful that she showed up for me. Before we packed up at the library that day, my husband took a photo with me and Audrey and our cousin Chris, and it did not feel like meeting strangers. Really, it didn't. It really truly felt like sitting down with the family that maybe you've had your whole life, except somehow this was the first time we had sat down together. It was really strange. It was really special. And I'm so thankful for the opportunity to meet Audrey and be in her life and have her be in my life. And I'm just really grateful. So thank you so much for letting me share a little bit about Audrey and the things that I've learned from her, and the chain between the past and the present. This is how it's always worked. You ask, you carry it forward. Let's not let that chain break on our watch. And I'm so thankful for the opportunity to meet Audrey and be in her life and have her be in my life. And I'm just really grateful. So thank you so much for letting me share a little bit about Audrey and the things that I've learned from her, and the chain between the past and the present. This is how it's always worked. You ask, you carry it forward. Let's not let that chain break on our watch. Audrey remembered a lot. She remembered it right. Rest easy, cousin.